Science and Technology. Thank you for your participation despite your very busy schedule this morning. And there are many dignitaries whom I have to recognize. Vice President Professor Roh Dong-yang and Professor Emeritus of Yoon Sun-chang, who is well known to you, and my good classmate, Professor An Chong-sik, has been bridging this opportunity between the Author Center and myself. We have been classmates. We, in fact, we are class of 63, so it is 56 years ago. I'm this morning standing before you this morning. I'm a little bit puzzled that I thought that there would be more students. I would be addressing the students, but I see more professors in fact here. So what should I do in front of all these very distinguished professors who have been teaching all these subjects? Again, bear with me for half an hour. What I'm going to tell you is not academic. I'm not an academic, but I'm just going to tell you based on my experience as a lifelong diplomat and also, most importantly, as a Secretary General of the United Nations for 10 years. I've been dealing with almost all the things which you may expect, which are happening and will happen, or which happened in the past on this earth. In addition to from retiring my job during the last almost 3 years now, I have been dealing with almost the same things, which I used to do at the United Nations, but except there's a huge difference. While I have been talking about sustainability, climate change, human rights, gender empowerment, inequality issues, but I have a very limited staff, resources, whatever it may happen. Metaphorically, if I may say, I can say that when I was a Secretary General, I thought that I was traveling on a huge aircraft carrier. You know that there are thousands of soldiers, sailors, and aircraft, submarines protecting me, frigate, etc., helicopters. But now I'm rowing myself, a small boat, reading and writing, one hand and I'm rowing. But I am proud of what I am now doing as a former Secretary General. But it's not only just a former Secretary General, as I was introduced as a chairman of a National Council for Air Quality and Climate, but in addition to that, I am wearing at least 20 hats on my head. These are all something similar to all what UN Secretary General would do. First of all, I'm a chairman of the GGGI, a Global Green Growth Institute, which is headquartered in Seoul, which will work again together with Korean government P4G, partnering for green growth. And then I'm also chairman of the Global Commission on Adaptation. This is very important policy responses, two policy responses in addressing climate change, adaptation and mitigation. Mitigation has been highly appreciated and have taken by many governments, but not much on adaptation. Some of you might have read my op-ed to New York Times day before yesterday. If you have not, please try to read this as a front page of New York Times, top news, criticizing President Trump, withdrawing from this climate agreement of Paris. I was curious, in fact, I was angered by what President Trump did. So if I would really urge you strongly to read day before yesterday's New York Times, which I said climate crisis in terms President Trump can understand. The title is a bit condescending, but I told him that climate change is quite clear. Climate change is coming, approaching much faster than one may think. It's not something about politics. It's the nature. We cannot negotiate with the nature. Nature goes its own way. Nature does not negotiate with the human being, so it is the human being who should really follow the voices of the nature. There are many important statistics, etc., so I hope you will read this one. In any way, I am very happy to talk about very important issues. For about half an hour, I first discuss about what and where we are now facing, basically sustainability. As Professor Park Shul-jin had already, Kim Jun had already briefed the sustainability. What does that sustainability mean? Sustainability, according to what United Nations had termed it, is that without undermining the resources which should be used by our succeeding generation, we make sure that we live in a prosperous and healthy society while using the resources without undermining, without consuming in advance, which will have to be used by our succeeding generation. That's the sustainability. During the millennia, tens of thousands of years since a human being began to exist, it must have been a strong desire as a human being. It's just nature that people really wanted to live in peace, prosperity, and healthy and security, safety. These are just a basic instinct of human beings, and even animals. But without any science, technology, without any tools, people have lived that way, in a very primitive way. It was until the end of the Second World War when people began to think very seriously how the political leaders, how the leaders of the society can make sure that people live more in peace. Then later, just living in safety and peace would not mean much. We have seen 65 million people killed during the Second World War. At least 3 million people were killed during the Korean War. Those are the major catastrophic things. In fact, during many thousand years, the political leaders, they have been really trying to achieve their own dream at those times. Mostly securing more territory and make sure that their people could live. But it is mostly royalty, kings and soldiers, generals, or people in higher position. They were living in healthy and prosperous way. Only in 1987, after almost 40 years of end of Second World War, the world leaders began to think more seriously how we can make sure that we live in sustainable way. That was what is widely known. Brundtland Commission was held in 1987. Brundtland was the 3-term Prime Minister of Norway. She and I are still working very closely. Even I met her last month in London, and we will continue to meet. We work together as part of the elders. This is elders group consists of just 12 people, mostly Nobel Peace Laureate, a former president, just 12 people. It was founded by Nelson Mandela and by Jimmy Carter, Desmond Tutu, or my predecessor Kofi Annan, etc. So I'm very proud that she is still working on sustainability issues. Then I think the people began to think more about climate and more about social development. In 1993, there was a big social development summit in Copenhagen where Korean President Kim Il-sung participated. It was the first time, as I know, that Korean leaders began opening their eyes about the sustainability. Then, as you know, 1997, there was a Kyoto Protocol, which came effective only in 2005. And then, when the leaders and people were celebrating the dawn of the new millennium, 2000, the people were very serious, and particularly political leaders, and led by the United Nations. What kind of message, what kind of system, governance, and what kind of visions the United Nations should give to the people's world of the world. That is what we have known as Millennium Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals. What I can tell you at this time, when the Millennium Development Goals were well designed, I don't think it was a well designed one. People were just anxious and very much excited at the dawn of 2000, year 2000. So they were thinking that what kind of vision, what kind of promise we should give to the people. They made 8 promises in the framework of Millennium Development Goals, starting from eradicating extreme poverty, abject poverty by half by 2015. They gave a 15 years promise. As everybody knows here, the Korean government is a good example, you know, all this these days we don't have this 5-year economic or social development programs, but during the time of President Park Chung-hee and the succeeding administration until President Roh Tae-woo, they've been having every 5 years social economic development programs. United Nations first initiated these Millennium Development Goals with a 15 years. That ended in 2015. Then in 2015, during my time as a Secretary General, we really wanted to provide and promise much more ambitious, much more far-reaching vision to the people of the world. That is Sustainable Development Goals. Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals, with the 17 goals. 17 goals. I'm wearing, in fact, this badge of the United Nations. This is a Sustainable Development Goals badge with the 17 goals with different colors. Now, just let me tell you what is the basic philosophical vision. World leaders, business leaders, political leaders, and civil society leaders realized that this world cannot go on like this way. Let the people be given opportunities, equal opportunities, and the way they can live sustainably. First target is again by 2030. By 2030, there should be nobody in this world, on this earth, who will suffer from hunger, abject poverty. So this is a very ambitious one. Even World Bank believes that whether it can be done or not. But we have to work. We have to work. We still have 11 years to go. Then we should make everybody healthy, and there should be nobody There should be nobody who die needlessly from preventable diseases. We have professors of medicine here. There are many people who die needlessly without any reason because of the lack of medical and health assistance systems. 6 million children die needlessly again before they become 5 years old. Even though maternal death rate had been reduced by 45% by 2015, there are still many women who die again needlessly because of the lack of health service when they give birth. My argument as a Secretary General had been that a woman in South Sudan should be treated equally, should be as safe as a woman in Sweden or in the United States or in Japan and Korea. But a lot of women die while delivering a due birth, a due life. This is again injustice. So there are many such agendas. All 17 agendas are all indexed. 17 goals, 169 targets. Each goal has scientifically organized target and indexes against which we can measure whether these sustainable development goals are working. Then what is now current status? After almost now 2015, 4 years, almost 4 years is almost over. The implementation level is very much uneven, depending where people are living. There is a German foundation, Bertelsmann Stiftung. The Stiftung is in German foundation. Bertelsmann's foundation issued a report this summer. They ranked all the countries of 165 countries, not 193, because there is almost usually no meaningless to check all the countries, in Africa. So 165 countries have been ranked. From 1 to 20, best performing countries are mostly Europeans. There are only 4 non-European countries who are performing well, who belong to within the ranks of 20. That is New Zealand, Canada, Japan, and South Korea. I'm very much relieved, but should not be relieved too much. Who knows what will happen. We have to do much better, much more. In that regard, we should thank President Moon. It mostly covers during his time. I am very happy that Korea belongs within the rank of 20. United States, they belong to 38th. They are ranked at 38. It's only natural that, looking at what President Trump does on sustainability, he does not care about the climate phenomena. In any way, this is what the United Nations had promised. This is what I have promised as a Secretary General. I am proud personally, but it's not attributable to me. It is attributable to all the political leaders, business leaders, and civil society leaders, particularly many academicians who have been speaking out all the times, and particularly those people on the street. Civil society, they've been really speaking out, urging, challenging the world leaders. World leaders, political leaders, they are very difficult people to, first of all, to deal with. Lot of different types of egos and characters. They're not like the Secretary General of the United Nations. Secretary General is always good people here, but political leaders are very different, very different. But they have been challenged by the people, Like so many environmentalists. Whenever I was attending conferences organized by the United Nations, I saw many Koreans, former prime ministers, former ministers. They were acting like a civil society people. For example, Prime Minister Gogan, he was always there whenever he was not given any treatment as a former prime minister. He was treated as a civil society volunteers. It really humbled me. Whenever I saw so many civil society leaders, in that regard, we really should be very much grateful to those hardworking scholars and civil society leaders. Now then, as time is very much limited, then I'm just giving you, there are a lot of things which I can tell you, but what I'm really asking political leaders, now we have Senior Advisor Lee, Professor Lee here from the Blue House, it is the political will which matters, political will, which really counts. When the leadership of the government or business or society, they have clear vision, clear understanding, and clear commitment, then I think there is nothing which we cannot do. This is what I'm saying, global partnership. Starting from government, business community, there's a huge area of work business can contribute. Of course, the civil society, they have only their mouth, their voices. They don't have money, they don't have the resources, but it's a business. There is no government in this world who have more money than business communities. Business communities run trillions of dollars money. So the money should come from business. All the visions which has been set by the government should be implemented in the way of advancing science and technology. With the advent of fourth industrial revolution now, nano or all this IoT, robotics, etc., then government doesn't have money, in fact. Very limited budget. It is the business community who should really advance science and technology. Therefore, how the political leader's role is to forge a stronger partnership, global partnership. I think Future Earth and Asia Society, Asia Institute here is a part of such global partnership. In that regard, I'd like to really thank Earth Institute, Asia Institute for all what had been doing, scaling up the conversation and engaging international policymakers through science insight, publications, etc., etc. And they have been also working closely with the government officials. They have been intersecting with the government and the civil society and the business community. What is important at this time is innovation, as I said, science and technological innovation. Innovation through the locomotives of science and technology will be a key factor in ensuring the ultimate success of the SDGs. To do this, we must harness new thinking and approaches, particularly in regard to the expanding role of scientific research and innovation in the global development area. And I simply don't have time, we simply don't have time to spare. Consider the fact that according to the World Water Development Report, there will be 40% of more demand for water. Korea will soon become water-stressed country. Water-stressed country. It's very alarming that the Korean people believe that there is no limit in our water resources. But soon, Korea will become a water-stressed country. Again, I'm emphasizing the innovation. Innovation, particularly in this science and technology, is a crucial component of implementing science sustainable development goals. Innovation is embedded in the SDG goals together with the advancing this partnership. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just let me finish by saying more about climate change. There are 17 goals, starting from 1 to 17. It covers almost all the spectrums of human lives, starting from abject poverty eradication till the partnership, 17, and also even justice. Number 16 is about justice and strong institutions. So you can be sure that if we are able to implement by 2030 all 17 goals, I'm sure that whole world's people will be able to live in a much, much better world, much more sustainable world than what can be done. We must address climate change issue first. The Korean government has done much in poverty eradication. There are not many people who are suffering from abject poverty. There are not many people who really die needlessly from preventable diseases in South Korea. There are almost no children who are not going to school. So everybody is now going to school. Almost full university courses. Just to think that more than 60 million people, children, school-aged children, are not going to school around the world. Therefore, we should not just stay here. We have to do much, much more. When it comes to number 13 goal, climate change, the climate change can spoil all our achievements. If you do not invest wisely in climate resilient infrastructure, I think this is important, then our society, community, will not be able to address climate issues. In that regard, how to wisely adapt to this changing situation is very important. That's why I'm now chairing this Global Commission on Adaptation. I'm the chairman. Co-chair is Bill Gates. Another co-chair is Kristalina Georgieva, who was recently appointed as managing director of the IMF. So three are working with at least 25 heads of state and government. I'm very happy that Korea joined this Global Commission on Adaptation last September when President Moon came to the United Nations. And I was chairing this one, and I announced myself that Korea has joined this GCA, Global Commission on Adaptation. Without addressing climate change, nothing can be done. I met Pope Francis last April, and we were, of course, discussing climate change issues. He told me very inspiring words. He said, God always forgives. I'm sure that God always forgives anybody. Human beings sometimes forgives. It is also true. But he said, the nature never forgives. This was quite inspiring. We have been neglecting to the cries of nature. Nature has been sending message in the form of devastation. Just one typhoon, cyclone, hurricane, just sometimes damage, in extreme case, 200% of one country's GNP. In 2017, Dominican Republic was devastated with more than 220% of their GNP. In Bangladesh, when they were not adapting to this situation, one cyclone killed 300,000 people just over 2 days or so. In 2008, in Myanmar, I was there myself, one cyclone, Nagis, killed 132,000 people overnight. So that's what nature is warning us. I hope President Moon and Environment Ministry and Science and Technology Ministry and all government officials and government departments must do much more in addressing this fast approaching climate phenomena. And that's the voice, that's the warning of the nature. Again, I can call many important issues, but I know that there is going to be some Q&A session, so I will be very happy if you have any questions to raise. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important that we are united, solidly united in addressing global challenges. That's the only way which we can address all these global challenges. Okay, let us work together to make this world much better, more sustainable way to leave our world to our succeeding generations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ban Ki-moon, for your great speech and the sharing the remarkable insight for us. There is one unfortunate news due to the next schedule. Our keynote speaker will be leaving soon. So I will give you. I will go into the Q&A session shortly. So if anyone want to raise a question, I will give the chance of only 2 persons. Possibly from young generation, and one from the foreign scholars, and then one from the Korean. Okay, so could you all person raise your hand if you want? So I will give a chance for him firstly, and then secondly to the Professor Kasuka from Japanese participant. Sorry for. 죄송합니다. 두 분만.
제가 질문하세요.
제가 끝날까요? 예. 네, 그러면 저분 먼저 손들겠습니다. 예. 짧고 굵게 말해주십니다. 예. 본인 소개부터 짧게.
네, 저는 이중재라고 하면 개봉동 사는 서울 시민인데요. 지금 방법으로는 기후 변화를 막을 수가 없어서 트럼프 대통령이 사기다 뭐 이런 얘기를 하면서 이제 미국에서 탈퇴한 거로 알고 있는데요. 그래서 이제 우리나라에서 스마트 원자로를 사우디에다가 이렇게 이제 수출을 하는데 그 스마트 원자로가 해수를 강수로 전환시킨다고 합니다. 그래서 그 스마트 원자로 그러니까 앞으로 유엔에서 이 원자로를 고도화시켜 갖고 해수를 강수로 전면적으로 전환을 시켜 갖고 그러면은 사막화도 막고 해수면 상승도 막기 때문에 그 방법을 연구해야 되지 않나. 그리고 또 그런 유엔기를 우리 북쪽에다가 설치하면 또 비핵화에도 도움이 되고 해서 우리 총장님께서 좀 많이 좀 연구를 좀 해주시기 바랍니다.
That's economic and scientific, but also it implies a little bit political implications. In any way, that's a good question. As I'm now working as the chairman of a National Council on Air Quality and Climate and Air Quality, that's one area which we'll have to work very seriously. At the United Nations, we've been working very serious about what should be the optimal and reasonable, sustainable global energy mix. But it's quite evidently clear that we are in the process of phasing out of coal-based fossil fuels. There are some countries like the United States, Australia, or some Poland who are still depending a lot on fossil fuel, coal fuel. We also have a 60 coal-fired thermal plants. But worldwide trend is that we are phasing out. How to make energy mix sustainable way. You have a huge chunk of energy resources will be missed. Then those vacancies should be filled with some other energy. It can be done by LNG, it can be done renewable energy, solar energy, wind power energies, and also atomic energy, nuclear energy. Therefore, there should be a reasonable energy mix. And this is what I'm sure that President Moon is also seriously discussing this matter with his advisors. I am also in the process of making certain proposal to the government next year, how this national energy mix can really help in addressing, improving air quality. When it comes to air quality, you should also know, this is just striking and unbelievably surprising when it comes to air quality of Korea. According to a Greenpeace survey report released this year, among 100 worst air polluted cities among OECD countries, there are about 4,000 or 5,000 cities among 36 OECD countries. Among 100 worst polluted cities, 44 cities are in Korea. Can you believe that? I was not sure whether I should really trust this report. But when you go to the United States, Australia, European countries, most of the countries, skies are blue, deep blue. And so, whether there are 1,000 cities, it is clear that they don't have much pollution problem. But in the name of industrialization, in Korean 잘 살아보세, that has been the most important values and vision of Korean government. We didn't know we were abusing our privilege to live sustainably with our nature. That's what's happening. That's what we are now suffering. Everybody is wearing masks. everybody, newscasters are forecasting whether this air quality fine dust, particulate matter 2.5 is good or bad or normal, etc., etc. That's why, out of just necessity, urgent necessity, President Moon asked me to take care of this issue. I presented my proposal on September 27, that unless we take drastic measures, there's no way for us to keep and allow our people live and with fresh air, clean air. First proposal was that we will, starting from December till March, 4 months, we will shut down the firepower stations, minimum 9, maximum 27. During the month of March, we will shut down minimum 22 to 27 firepower stations. We will forbid 1.1 million cars, all the diesel-using cars, off the street. And we'll make sure that all industries, big industries, their emission level of fine dust will be measured every half an hour, will be released to the public through using telemeter system or whatever, or drone. So industrial communities, they should really make sure that their industrial activities should be sustainable, climate resilient, should not emit this PM 2.5. They have to invest to make sure that there is no difference between present or even civil society workers. Present also breathe same air. We are living in the same breathing community. And that's why we have to think very seriously about the energy mix, how to deal with this nuclear energy, etc. Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Song Huang. I'm really happy to attend this conference. And my question is this: when I was in the long time ago, when I was studying at Boston, where I learned sustainability was from the MIT Media Lab or Harvard Innovation Lab. The place where I learned sustainability is kind of the place for the startup. And then I realized when I was at the Boston, like the startup is very important place to teaching the sustainability or change, doing something better than themselves. And then when I back to the Korea, I was very surprised because it's really hard to communicate with government, and also it's really hard to communicate with the university, because they even the knowledge or people doesn't know how does the actual startup ecosystem works. And then I'm kind of like try to be a startup guy, and I'm doing startup guy. So I'm kind of wonder to know personally how startup guy can approach the government, or like big guy like you, or another thing is how can I stop government people imagining startup ecosystem by their dream, not actual people, startup guys advice like me. There was two things, and I want to know cause I first thing is I would like to, I will make it shorter. So I believe more than government, Elon Musk changed more, and then I want to know how the government think about startup, and how startup guy have to think about the government or like big group. That's my question.
Well, your question seems to be beyond my authority. I'm not in the government in any way, even though I'm doing important things outside of the government. Whether it's a startup or big business, what is important is that how you make sure that your business operations are sustainable in line with what this United Nations climate agreement, as well as some visions United Nations has presented. The governments, depending upon where you are, may have various different types of policies. Like President Moon, surely he has also good policies how to make startup people as well as a small and medium business can really do their business, but that's not my area of doing business. But I'm sure that you can talk with the government officials here. We have a senior advisor from Blue House here, so she must have heard what you say. Now, I'm more interested, much more interested, and I'm really trying to raise a campaign that we should educate the people, particularly young people, about the importance of sustainability, importance of living harmoniously with our nature. That means how to address climate change. There is a tendency to believe that this is something president and ministers should do. But professors, you have a hugely important role here to teach the young students. That's why recently, just about 10 days ago, since 10 days ago, I'm now talking this way. It is very important that each and every government try to educate these climate issues and sustainability issues since young. So I'm going to meet, in fact, Deputy Prime Minister and Education Minister. If there would be any way to change our curriculum so that the elementary school students, from beginning elementary school, they should be educated about the importance of climate and sustainability. Normally, you are taught when you become university students, but that's too late. That's too late. They have to think about their jobs and future, marriage, or whatever. So they may not be much committed to this. It is important that we educate them since young. They are very young. That's what I'm going to, I think I'm going to meet her next week. The Italian government, you must have read in the newspaper, it was reported in Korean newspaper. Last week again, Italian education minister has declared the whole Italian students, starting from elementary, middle school, and high school, will have to study at least 31 hours on climate and sustainability. That's a fantastic news. I have never communicated with him, but I had already been speaking out. I have spoken to Chinese government, I have spoken to Mongolian ministers, and now I'm going to speak Korean minister. I hope Professor Lee, you just keep and give some political push on this. Now, we are talking very serious about what kind of examination process, selecting student process would be at the university. But I think educating young students about sustainability and climate will be far, far more important than this how to how to select university students. Is it okay? You're satisfied with my answer? You may not be satisfied, but
I appreciate everything. Just yeah.
Excuse me, due to time.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much, Excellency. I'm very happy because my topic I will present later is about the environmental education in school career. Yeah. Anyway, I will give a chance with the final one question from the Professor Kasuka from Japan. Good morning. I'm Fumiko Kasuga I'm Fumiko Kasuga in Japan, representing Future's Global Secretariat this time. And as a global research program covering a wide range of scientific disciplines and with global networks, Future's in terms of the science policy interface, especially for climate change, we have been delivering 10 key messages at the COPs of climate change and providing an urgent statement at high-level political forum of SDGs and consolidating scientific evidence to be used for decision makings, for example, for target settings for SDGs, for local and national government decision making, and also for exploring new and innovative networks with business sectors, including finance sectors. In your perspective, from your perspective, what kind of consolidated, integrated scientific activities urgently needed for in addition to existing our activities? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your good questions. In addressing global issues now, including climate sustainability, science and technology will have a very, very important role. That is why in formulating this SDG vision, I established a scientific advisory board. I have assembled about 30 the world's top scientists. And I opened a board in Germany. I went to Germany and assembled all these scientists to give us scientific evidences and scientific some ideas. This SDGs and climate change agreement, which was adopted in Paris, are all supported and evidenced by science and technology. It is also evidenced by the statisticians. So economic professors and economists, they have given all their projections, good ideas. But these projections and ideas should be, first of all, scientifically evidenced, supported. And not only supported by science, it should be supported by the statisticians as a way to measure against all what is now being implemented, whether it is again applicable or not. So in that regard, it is quite scientifically organized vision. It's not just the politicians, you should do this and that. It is a highly scientific based one. In that regard, I feel very proud. I have established a lot of panels, so-called wise men. Not only wise men, the political leaders, even though the respect level for politicians are very low in every country, but it is also the political leaders who can really show, foster, and harness the political will. When there is a political will supported by science and technology and economic projections, I think it can have a much bigger impact. That is why I have been urging the ownership, the political ownership. in 2016, when there was a G7 summit in Japan, of course I participated in my capacity as Secretary General, and I addressed all G7 leaders. Now that SDG and Paris Climate Change Agreement are released, presented, is now in your hands. It's not in the United Nations. The United Nations has presented and now in the hands of each and every government. I hope the leaders will take some stronger political ownership. I appreciate Prime Minister Abe for his taking my advice immediately, and he was the first leader in the world to establish SDG implementation headquarters directly under his leadership. I'm now asking, I have spoken to President Moon. The first time when he was elected, I met him, I advised him, please have SDG monitoring under your direct leadership. I spoke to Prime Minister Lee Ina-kyun, but I'm not sure whether it is done or not, but I had no way to. I hope Professor Lee, Dr. Lee, if you can check this one. It's very important. It's fortunate that we belong to within the 20 best performing countries, but that's not enough. That's not enough. President Moon should have a much stronger ownership. When the President Moon had presented 100 national top policy initiatives, and these are something which have to go in line with SDG policies, in line with the Paris Climate Change Agreement. So I'm really urging, it's a good opportunity to convey this message to you. Thank you. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear professors, thank you very much for your attention.
I believe all of us truly enjoyed this valuable time to meet Honorable Him face-to-face and directly. And it's time to say goodbye him. Let's see him off with a round of big applause again.